Then God stepped out in space, and he said, I'm lonely. I'll make me a world. And God looked out over the universe, and darkness covered everything. It was blacker than 100 midnights down in a cypress swamp until God smiled. And when God smiled, light broke out. The darkness rolled up on one side and the light rolled up on the other side. And God reached out and he took the light in his hand. He rolled the light up into his hand until he made the blazing hot sun, and he cast the sun out into the universe. And then he took the light that was left over from making the sun, and he rolled it up again, and he cast it out against the darkness, making the moon and all the stars. Then God looked at his creation, the sun, the moon, and then he took the world and cast it between the light and darkness. Then God stepped down on the earth. And everywhere his feet trod, he hewn out valleys and he belched up mountains. Then God looked at the earth. And he went to the side of the earth and he said, the earth is hot and barren. And he spat out the 7 seas. He clapped his hands and lightning flashed. He blinked his eyes and thunder roared. The waters came down from the top of the mountains and went down into the valleys and into the rivers and out into the Red Sea. Then God looked around and he said, I need something else. And so he reached up his hands and he waved his hands over the sky, and birds' wings began to split through the sky. He waved another hand over the sea and he said, come forth, and fish began to jump out of the waters and out of the seas. He waved his hand again against the forest and he said, come forth, and all kinds of animals began to come out of the forest. Then God said, I'm still lonely. He went over by the side of the sea, a big wide sea, and he sat on the side of the sea with his head in his hands, and he thought, I'll make me a man. So he scooped up some mud out of the sea, and he bent down over that mud like a mammy bending over her baby, and he formed that mud and shaped it into his own image, and he breathed into it the breath of life, and man stood up a living soul. And then he said, man, I want you to name everything that I've created. So the man looked up into the sky. He said, eagles and doves and swans and birds and robins. He looked into the forest and he said, giraffes and elephants and hippopotamuses and lions and tigers. He looked into the seas and he said sharks and seals. At the end of the day, man looked at all that he had named. And he looked at all the things that God had created. And man said, I'm lonely. So God put man to sleep. And while man was asleep, God performed an operation. He opened up man's side and took out a rib. And he made a woman. Man woke up and he looked. And God said, bone of your bone and flesh of your flesh, she shall be called woman. And man said, that's good.